14 WILI and 95.3 FM presents Hometown Threads, a closer look at our community and the people that make it go. Every week, you'll hear uplifting stories from our local businesses and our neighbors. Now, here's our host for Hometown Threads, Keith C. Rice.
Episode 43 of Hometown Threads on 14 WILI and 95.3 FM. And, of course, Willimantic Today Facebook. Keith C. Rice back in here. Let's see, we're in early November, so that means we're about a week away. I just thought of this. I think it's November 15th will be a one-year anniversary for this show, Hometown Threads. And thanks to all the guests, everyone who's been a part of it. Of course, Matt Rupar behind the board, and our wonderful sponsor, Liberty Bank, Be Community Kind, with 3 great local locations. West Main Street, Willimantic, Gateway Commons, across the street from the radio station at 679 Main Street, and right up the street, Route 195 in Mansfield. Liberty Bank, Be Community Kind, Matt Rupar, if you'd be so kind and say hello to everyone.
Hello.
There he is, the voice of Matt Rupar. And Hometown Threads airs 5:05 to 5:30 Tuesdays on WILI, 1400 AM, 95.3 FM. And of course, you could it'll be eventually posted from my page, the Keith C. Rice page, to Willimantic Today Facebook, so you can feel free to view the show as well. It's a pleasure to welcome in a man who I'm sure has many stories. You recognize the face, you'll recognize the voice too. Roger Adams. You don't have an official title because you've been retired for 10 years. What is your official title? Retired Roger. How about that?
Citizen at large.
Now,
No, it has been 10 years.
Yeah.
And I used to do some of this stuff in here too
That's
for
right.
a few years.
You were pretty much on my side, so Roger's very familiar with doing the radio thing. Of course, he had a very popular show on WILI. Let's see, it led right up. I guess you stopped doing it during COVID, right?
At the beginning of COVID.
So let's see, you said about maybe roughly 13 years, so from 2007, right, to about 2020.
Yep,
You
just
did
about.
Business Outlook was the name of the show. Let's get in right at that. Tell us about Business Outlook and right here that you did on WILI.
Well, I think the genesis for it was a radio show that the Chamber in Norwich was doing for a while, and I very much liked the way that they did that, and thought we ought to be able to do something like that. But it took about 10 years to get around to having a chance to do it here, and certainly the folks at WILI were helpful in getting that started. And it started out, the idea was a half-hour show, and to do it weekly, and we thought maybe we'd have a show that we'd do it for a year or two and see how it worked, and it ended up lasting 13 or 14 years. But the concept was to primarily interview chamber members and folks from local municipal governments, that kind of thing, development agencies, and talk about what was going on in the business community, what kinds of new projects people were involved with, if somebody had a new insurance office they were opening, expanding a car dealership, a 25th anniversary of being in business or something like that, and to kind of recognize local folks in the business community who are doing good things.
Now, you being so heavily involved with the Chamber for over 30 years in this community, I'm sure you had no problem finding a guest from week to week for Business Outlook, right?
Well, we knew who we wanted to interview, but it was amazing. We have ran into the same thing that you probably do occasionally, people that are not anxious to come and be on mic. It's as if they were doing a live TV show or something. And there's nothing to worry about, because problems and burps and hiccups can be edited.
I'll tell you right now, we are taping the show. I think people we do tape the show, so if things can be edited, thanks to our master producer behind the scenes. So,
but most people were pretty good. Every once in a while, there would be a guest who didn't want to elaborate the way we'd like to have them elaborate, as you run into as well. But basically, it was fun doing the show. We tried to give people 6 or 8 different questions that we'd like to get them to answer somewhere in the course of the discussion, just so that they have some idea where we were going, and it wouldn't be all brand new to them. And that seemed to work out in most cases pretty well.
And then sometimes they, because we all had guests that didn't look at the questions.
That's true. And some of them who would decide that they had the wrong day.
Well, that happened too, huh?
They would be planning to come in the next day or the next week.
All right, so
Matt and I waited for a couple of those a few times.
That's right. You and Matt know each other quite well, and it's been a while since. It's great to have you back in here and into the studios and all that. So we'll get into your years at the Chamber, because I'm sure you got a ton of story. My father was involved in for years, with you, working right up there with the Willimantic Chamber of Commerce. But for those of people, take us back to the early days of Roger Adams. Did you grow up in this community, or where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I'm a New Hampshire native. Both my wife and I are from New Hampshire. I grew up in Claremont on the Vermont border, and she's from Manchester. We met at UNH, what we call the real UNH, the University of New
Not
Hampshire.
New Haven, right?
But and then we worked in New Hampshire for a couple of years after we were married, and I got my Army Reserve active duty done. Then I came down here to go to grad school at UConn, and by the time I finished up an MBA program in '74, I guess, my wife had been working for the School of Allied Health at UConn for a couple of years by then, and she had started her graduate program, and she went on to a PhD program there as well. So by the time she finished, we had already been here about 7 or 8 years, and
Wow.
it wasn't as easy to move on as it would have been 2 years later. So I was probably, by the time she finished, I was probably 7 or 8 years into working for the chamber.
So you already, wow. So what were you doing? You were just working at the chamber? Were you doing anything else?
No, it was full time from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hired in the very end of '74.
What was your exact title you were hired for? Head of the...
Executive director.
So you were, wow. So you were executive director for how many years? All the way from the beginning to the end?
Yeah, we changed the titles a couple times. I think when we changed the corporate structure a little bit, I became president and CEO.
Did you start the Willimantic Chamber of Commerce?
No.
Oh, no,
No,
okay.
no. The chamber goes back to 1887.
Well, I didn't know if that was actually you that started. I'm kidding, I'm
That's a
kidding.
little scary. No, but we did the 100th anniversary, thing with we missed by I think 10 years with the Chronicle. The Chronicle was doing its 100th when we were doing its 110th when we were doing 100, something like that. They were I think 10 years older than
Okay,
than
pretty
we were.
close.
So Lucy Crosby and Kevin.
Oh, the Crosbys, yeah.
We did kind of a combined century celebration over at the Elks for our annual meeting.
What year was that again?
That would be
Roughly?
87.
Because tell us a little about that. That must have been a celebration.
Well, then Louise Guinarcha, Jack Guinarcha's wife, had been first selectman here for a while. I can't remember. No, she was after that she was first select. Or was it? I've forgotten exactly what year. But she was into the history at that time, and she did a lot of the research and put together a tabloid on the chamber's first 100 years, and
Wow.
we really appreciated that. That was a lot of work that she put into that. There's probably still a few copies of that kicking around in the closet somewhere. But the Chronicle helped with that as well, selling the ads and that kind of thing. But that was the 100th year celebration in '87.
How about that?
Yeah.
That must have been a great thing to be a part of. And you, heading up the chamber, you're probably, going into, what'd you say, about your 10th year, right
Yeah.
about then,
Yeah.
right? Now, the chamber building is on the corner of Bridge and Main.
Yeah.
I'm going back to when I was a kid. My father was going to all those meetings and the chamber.
Yeah.
Is that where you guys used to have the meetings?
No, that was too small for that. We had some committee meetings there. And we
Okay,
had
yeah.
a meeting room in the basement with a screen that we could pull down to show videos and that kind of thing.
Okay, I knew you had meetings there, but you're right. I think you told me before you had meetings mostly at Brand Rex, the old Brand
Yeah,
Rex.
The old Brand Rex Hospitality Center, the White House, and did some monthly meetings at the Shell Chateau and various
There
places.
must have
that
been some parties. Come on, there weren't just meetings; there were parties
Well,
then, right?
well, these are once a month board meetings where, the serious stuff was done as well as people had a bit of a social hour as well. But that building became the chamber's headquarters in 1954, I believe, right in that period somewhere.
The building on Bridge and Main.
Yeah. It had been just billboards in that corner.
Okay. Yeah.
And a group of the business leaders decided to get together and purchase that corner, and then they built a small building there and added another piece to it. So the side that's closest to Bridge Street, before the peaked roof was put on, it had a flat roof pitching back toward the railroad tracks.
Wow.
And if you looked at it from down on Bridge Street, you could see that the two sections of roof didn't quite line up.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember that.
Two buildings were put together, so we constantly had some issues with that flat roof. Wanted to be careful when you walked on it or anything, but it survived there as our headquarters until the renovations were done in, I'm gonna think it was
That was
probably
my next
about,
question. When did they fix that? Yeah.
2007, 2008, 2009. And
They
then
finally
we
got to it and fixed it.
Yeah,
Jeez.
put the peak roof on and did air conditioning and new heating and that kind of thing. That was a pretty sizable investment at that time.
I can imagine. Roger Adams is with us, episode 43 of Hometown Threads on 14 WILI, 95.3 FM, Willimantic Today Facebook, brought to you by Liberty Bank. Be community kind. Okay, what year did you step down? Well, you stepped down after you retired, so 10
Yeah,
years ago, right?
2013.
Okay, so you
end of 2013.
10 years since he stepped down, well, retired from the chamber and all that. What goes on back to that building on Bridge and Main? Is there, you may not know or you may know, is there anything that goes on in that building now anymore?
Well, that I think if I remember correctly, the way Diane from the chamber explained it to me, the chamber and the town swapped properties with some sort of an arrangement where the chamber is now over at what was the old senior center, the old school on Crescent
that's
Street.
right. Okay, over on Crescent
Yeah,
Street, right.
and
Yeah.
they've got the Veterans Center flags out there, and they do a lot of veterans-related projects and programs there now. But the chamber runs out of that building now, and the town's economic development office, I understood, was going to use the old chamber building. I don't think that came to fruition.
It's such a great looking building. You know, I always
Well,
wondered.
but the trouble is, it's a little on the small side.
Yeah.
The bathrooms are in the basement.
Wow.
There's no elevator, no ramp, so there are some issues like that.
Wow.
Plus, there's not enough. The lot is big enough to put parking behind it on
Right.
Bridge Street, but then you'd be driving out into driving blindly into Bridge Street,
it's
and those tractor trailers that come around the
Oh,
corner,
yeah.
they aren't all doing 10 miles an hour.
You got that right. So yeah, parking issues.
Yeah.
Reason why I'm so intrigued, I've never stepped foot in that building.
Really?
Yeah, all the
I
years
didn't
I've
know
lived
that.
here and then moved away and come back. Every day I drive, pretty much every day I drive by and I look and I'll think, wow, that's one building I've never stepped foot into. I'm sure there's a few others here in this town, but I've always been intrigued about that building. Diane took your place, right? Diane,
Yeah.
Wait, Diane Nadeau, was that
Yeah,
her senior?
yeah.
So she took your place?
She was with me for five or a little more than 5 years, I think.
Worked under you?
Yeah, she started as our membership director.
Oh, okay.
And her first year or 2 years, she primarily was selling memberships and advertising. And then as we got involved in some other stuff, and she started getting involved in the arts and tourism and stuff like that. And
So you were starting to sense that maybe you hadn't even brought up to her, like as you were entering the year. Okay, you knew when you were going to step down. Maybe you didn't, but you have a sense that okay, Diane might be the person who could take over for me. Or?
yeah, there was never any question in my mind that she would have the ability to do it. But we still answer to a board of directors and that kind of thing. So there's a process you need to go through in that case.
Really?
And they did. They went through they advertised the position, and she was selected to be the replacement.
Oh. Over the years, who are some of the other people that worked with you on the chamber? As far as by the way, I know is my father still? He's still a member of the chamber, right?
Yeah.
What did he ever?
Hall Communications would be the member now.
Hall Communications.
Yeah, it's a,
it used to be
it's
nothing
a
but
company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some other people you like to mention throughout the years that were heavily involved, like yourself. That you got any story? I'm sure you got tons of chamber
Really?
stories.
Yeah, we could do several
You
stories.
could do several shows probably.
Well, we always tried in the early days. We always tried to have a good mix of insurance agencies, financial institutions, car dealerships, retailers, an attorney or two, a doctor if we could get one, so that we had a good mix and a cross section of involvement from across.
You really got to keep a good balance.
That's right, because one of the things the chamber gets involved with is things like development issues, transportation issues, business taxes, zoning and zoning code, not zoning code enforcement, but zoning and planning, and the attitudes or the approaches that some business people take toward what's desirable growth may be different than a teacher or a doctor or a retiree might take. What we might have considered in 1978 to be a desirable interstate expressway going between Hartford and Providence, right by Willimantic, might not have been what some people at Yukon and some other places had in mind. And that was about a 20-year battle that we were involved with.
So it tells, you guys were really involved with that. I remember
Sure.
as being younger but aware enough to follow that battle, and that went on for 20 years.
Probably about 20 years before it was finally laid to rest and taken off the plans. There were people at the Department of Transportation that told me that they expected they would spend their entire careers at the Department of Transportation working on I-84/Route 6 Expressway. And they probably did. They've probably been retired for 25 years now.
Wow.
But there were hearings, environmental hearings, all kinds of hearings. And we were at most of them, one way or another. And for quite a while, we thought there was a pretty good chance it would go through. And then the last 5 or 6 years, the handwriting was pretty much on the wall that it was never going to happen.
Yeah, because refresh my memory. I remember at one point it got pretty close like it was going to happen. And then what did happen, as you just said, those last 5 or 6 years, what led? Did other people just start stepping in? No, like, this can't happen.
But there were several environmental groups, and I like environmental groups. There's no problem with environmental groups. They're good folks.
The whole wetland issue, right?
Wetland issues, air quality, stream encroachment, a whole variety of those kinds of things. There were. At one point, they thought they'd take it as far as 395 in Plainfield or wherever it would have intersected, and stop it there because Rhode Island wasn't going to let it.
Right.
There were a whole bunch of different arguments that went on. We had a file drawer full of that stuff, and it's been probably 25 years now since it was put to bed. So I haven't thought about it much since then.
25 years, but. Take us back to the day where they finally said, that's it, it's official, it's not happening. What was going through your mind? I mean, you had to be a little bit frustrated.
Well, a little bit, but I mean, the handwriting had been on the wall for a while, so I think it was more of a relief to say, well, we can stop arguing about this now and start dealing with, Yukon growth issues.
Because I'm sure that occupied a lot of time.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
As you just said, there were other issues like. That you guys could have been. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were the other issues you guys could have tackled if the whole expressway?
We were involved with after-school programming at some of the schools, trying to encourage the school system to do. At one time, there wasn't much for after-school programming for kids, and we knew that the communities that had successful ones, some of the bigger manufacturing communities, once kids tended to be getting into more trouble than they might have been 40 or 50 years ago after school. The idea of having after-school sports programs, homework help programs, extra language learning and that kind of thing was a great thing, because then people working at a Brand Rex or at Yukon who weren't going to get home till 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening knew that their kids were not spending 3 hours after school doing something the parents didn't know that they were doing. Yeah. So we were very much in favor of after-school programming.
During your 30-plus years with the Willimantic Chamber of Commerce, Roger Adams, what is one thing, or about one thing you're really proud of, and one major memory besides the whole expressway fiasco there?
Well, I think it looked for a while like, fairly early on, this goes back to around 1980, as if this area would completely lose its connection to the rail system for moving freight. And at that time, there were probably 5 or 6 pretty good-sized manufacturers and 3 or 4 distribution outlets that used rail freight at one level or another. Brand Rex used some, Jones and Laughlin at that time used some. Willie Waste wasn't an issue yet. Kendall Company out in North Wyndham used it. Rogers Corporation used it or not, but the lumber and coal companies used it, and it looked like it was gonna disappear, and we helped as much as we could to make sure that Providence and Worcester got approved and was recruited to come to this area. We weren't directly involved in it until they showed up as a candidate, and then we were, because they were good folks and small independent for-profit company, and they've been at it for a while.
Wow. How about some people that I don't know, throughout the years, besides my father? I mean, who are besides, and of course you mentioned Diane. How about some other people throughout the years that you 30 plus years of the Willimantic Chamber of Commerce? How about this? Who was right alongside with you through most of those 30 years?
Well, there are people like Jack Guernaccio was president and a board member for many years. Joe Duval, your neighbor
Right
across
here.
the street down here, yeah. In the early days, a lot of the leadership came from companies like Brand Rex, American Thread, and the Kendall Company. We tried to get the general managers or somebody close to the general manager level involved. Several of the bank executives,
Yeah.
Rayo Brulard when he was at Savings Institute, Bob Gillard from Willards. There are far too many people to remember. If I try to name them all, I'm going to miss some that
It's
I'm
all
going
right.
to be embarrassed about.
I got a
afterwards.
question before I got one more question, and then we usually give our guests an opportunity for final thoughts in the last couple minutes. But if you were to approach me about joining the chamber back in the day, what was your how would you go about recruiting someone to join the Willimantic Chamber of Commerce?
Well, it was Wyndham Region Chamber. We covered about 10 towns.
I'm sorry, Wyndham Region.
That's
I'm
okay.
calling it the yeah.
That's okay, not a big deal. Our membership was primarily in Mansfield and Wyndham, and it got thinner as you went on that outside thinner circle. But our idea was that we were a place where you could bring your ideas about business, legislation, taxation, education, and combine voices with a lot of other employers, big and small, who shared the load based on their size, based on the number of employees or the bank deposits, that sort of thing, and carried the burden for helping carry the region forward. And we went to the legislature formally as a group once a year, and informally far more times than that for hearings and testimony to try to present the employer's point of view when it came to things like transportation systems, taxes, expansion of education systems, and those kinds of things, because we knew that things like tech ed were important for employers. And of course, you have to remember that in 1975 or 1980, the kind of employment that was the base here in this area was much different than it was by about 2000.
Yeah.
When I started in the 70s, there were probably about a half a dozen decent-sized manufacturing companies that had 200, 300, 400 employees or more.
You had it easier back then, huh?
It was. I agree.
You probably did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Final thoughts and anything you'd like to mention before we wrap things up. Episode 43 of Hometown Threads.
Well, one of the things that I always used to emphasize, I think, with publications that we put out, was how pleased we were in this area that we had in a region this size. We had our own local radio station, our own local newspaper, family owned, just like your company was. We had our own local, a local general hospital, Wyndham Hospital, had our own local airport. And we thought those were great assets that should help the region continue to attract population, attract small business, and hold its own in a challenging economy. And I hope it has. It hasn't done what some other places have, but a lot of other Northeast cities haven't either.
You did a tremendous job over the years, and you deserve a lot of credit. You're a legend. You are a legend.
Well, I don't know about that.
Now, Wyndham Region Chamber of Commerce, right?
Yeah.
All this time I'm saying the Willimantic Chamber because I'm thinking of the building.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to have Roger Adams for episode 43. Now retired Roger. Roger Adams, who spent 30 plus years with the Windham Region Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for sharing some stories.
Glad to
of
do
course,
it.
He knows these microphones quite well with the show Business Outlook that ran on WILI for about 13 years. So it's good to have Roger back here. Thank you to J. Matt Rupar, Liberty Bank, Be Community Kind. Wow, next week might be our 1-year anniversary celebration. Where's the confetti? Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. In the words of the great Roddy McCumber,
bye for now, folks. Bye for now.
And that concludes another edition of Hometown Threads. Got a story for Keith? Reach out to him on Facebook by searching Keith C. Rice or email him at krice@hallradio.net. Don't forget to tune in next week on 14 WILI and 95.3 FM, as well as the Willimantic Today page on Facebook.